Filmmaking, like any other art, is constantly changing and evolving as our technology and society develops around us. You'd be hard pressed to find a type of art that hasn't evolved and changed from its origins from day one, and cinema is no exception to this. With that said, cinema is unique in one regard. Unlike many forms of fine art, film is incredibly young and new. Painting, sculpting, and dancing, as examples, are thousands of years old, whereas film is just over 100 years old. Cinema is an art that has always been dictated by the technology that enables it. The origins of film can be drawn back further than the black and white clips that we think of as the origins of film. Spinning zoetropes in the 1830s were one of the first attempts at the reproduction of a moving image for an audience. A single frame with a couple seconds of information. That was the forefront of moving pictures for 60 years, until William Kennedy Dixon's kinetograph, which laid the foundation of film cameras for the next century. This was the beginning of the snowball that rolled and grew into the first short moving pictures of daily life, played in small theaters to woo an audience. This period of early experimentation and technological infancy is known as the Pioneer Era. By 1910, enough of the early technical hurdles that prevented continuous filming had been solved. Filmmakers began to experiment with the early visual styles of their films. Billy Blitzer and D.W. Griffith spent the years after 1910 through the 30s creating over 500 films and are credited with the popularization of key film techniques such as close-ups, fade-outs, and soft focus. German Expressionism also exploded in the 20s with distinct styles of distortion and extreme performances. German Expressionist films often used indoor lighting-controlled sets with high contrast and shadowed figures. Films such as Sunrise, The Song of Humans in 1927, made the first use of dolly movements to track characters and extreme angles and close-ups to express character emotion. Films from the silent era would later go on to be hugely influential to directors like Alfred Hitchcock, as seen in Psycho. By the end of the 20s, two major movements of film were on the rise. Film studios had ballooned into the giants of the industry, primarily in Hollywood. Each studio was known for its own genre of films and specific visual style associated with it. Cinematographers working at the studios would have to conform to the style of the studio, leading to little room for innovation. At the same time, silent films had evolved into talkies. The inclusion of dialogue had a significant impact on how visuals of a film are created. Information for the viewer that used to be shown visually could be told through dialogue, freeing the camera to add other elements to the scene. At the same time, though, cameras had never had to worry about sound before. The popular camera for studio use at the time was the Bell & Howell 2709, which was hand-cranked and incredibly loud.
And flip the lever and do your fade up.
To remedy this for the interim period while quieter systems were developed, cameras were operated inside large and bulky soundproof boxes. This made the camera immovable for many earlier films with dialogue, and wouldn't be fixed until the early 30s where camera blimps were introduced. The golden era of film is considered to have started in 1940 and lasting till 1954. During this period, we saw the emergence of film noir and Italian neorealism. Both of these styles of filmmaking reflected on the harsh reality of life, as well as the aftermath of World War II. Film noir specifically focused on darker themes of crime, corruption, and cruelty. Story arcs in film noir often reflected on harder living conditions from the Great Depression. Film noir's genres of crime and drama were emphasized through incredibly gloomy black and white scenes, Dutch angles, and harsh lighting. It was during this period, though, that studios began to allow experimentation in style. Director of photography Greg Toland experimented with lenses design and use, leading to the style of deep focus, which would bring the foreground and background to the same level of tension to the audience. He then used this style of deep focus, most notably in 1941's Citizen Kane. The golden era of Hollywood was abruptly halted by the advent of home TVs. Starting in 1955, Hollywood studios focused on creating big screen spectacles to distinguish themselves from television. Cinematographers experimented with new technologies in pursuit of epic grandeur. Sets fully relying on studio became less popular as films began to shoot more on location in other countries, such as Lawrence of Arabia. As the Hollywood studios fought to adapt to changing times, French New Wave films sought to reject dependence on studios entirely and their concrete styles. French New Wave did out with the strong narrative and focused on representing more complex ideas instead. Without studio backing, French New Wave projects were often low budget and low resource, which both had a heavy influence on the visual style. These films were often handheld and naturally lit, using locations over sets due to budgetary reasons. 1977 is considered the dawn of the modern film industry. The old guard of the golden era of Hollywood was retiring around this period, replaced by fresh DPs with new ideas. Blockbusters were popularized as films became more marketed. Films such as Barry Lyndon pushed the envelope on what was possible with celluloid film, shooting nearly entirely in natural light and designing every shot to look like an 18th century painting. Days of Heaven in 1978 treats the camera as a character. Scenes designed around the camera make them feel like they're in the scene, capturing the mood and tone as if the audience was really there. The 90s follow up to New Age film, where we sit today. Digital filmmaking is now the forefront of cinema, and as CGI continues to dominate, so does the movement for modern films to innovate on practical techniques and historical visual styles. The Lighthouse expertly utilizes expressionist horror and noir imagery while utilizing modern-day tools. But modern films also aim to chisel out their own niche of history. Cinematographers experiment with every new technology available to see how it could aid in the pursuit of visual storytelling. Perhaps someone will create a video essay on our own period of cinematography in the distant future. We'll just have to wait and find out.